As we read all four Gospels regarding Jesus' trial, we realize that there are three different trials that occurred after Jesus was arrested. The first trial happened in the house of Annas, the father in law of Caiaphas. We read about that in John's Gospel 18, verse 12 to 23. After that, we read the second trial that happened in the house of Caiaphas, the high priest. And this is documented in Matthew and in Mark. Here, we see that there are famous people present. We have the high priest, the teachers of the law, elders, chief priests, and the whole Sanhedrin. They were looking for false evidence against Jesus, as Matthew 26, verse 59 tells us. They were looking for these false evidences against Jesus from people who testified falsely. And it didn't work out well because these false witnesses' statements didn't agree. The irony here is that all of these people who are present in this trial are religious leaders who teach the Old Testament scriptures to the nation of Israel, and here they are seeking the help of false witnesses to frame Jesus in order to put him to death. Why the irony? Number one, bearing false witness is clearly prohibited in the Ten Commandments given by God through Moses. Number two, the penalty of bearing false witness is given in Deuteronomy 19, verse 16 to 20. When a false witness is giving his testimony, the one who is involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord, that is, before the priests and the judges who are in office. The priests should be doing the work of God on earth against any violation of God's laws. The priests and the judges make a thorough investigation, and if the witness proves to be a liar, then what he intended to do to others through his false witness must come upon him. For example, if person A attempts to do a false witness against person B so that person B is put to death, and if person A's witness is proved to be false, then what he desired for person B must come upon person A. That is, person A must be put to death. Here, the priests and the teachers of the law look for false witnesses and support its use in order to eliminate Jesus. By their deliberate use of a false witness to kill Jesus, they are guilty of death and deserve death. And now, two witnesses came forward. Matthew records these two witnesses like this. This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. Mark records it like this. I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another not made with hands. Even this accusation was not in agreement, as we see how Mark and Matthew puts this across. Also, the statement that they refer to was an event which happened 3 years prior to this trial. In John 2 verse 19, Jesus had said, Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. There is a stark difference between what Jesus said and what the false witnesses had rendered. Rather than cornering and confronting the false witnesses for their conflicting statements among themselves, along with what Jesus said, the high priest expresses and displays injustice towards Jesus. He tells Jesus to respond to these allegations, but Jesus remained silent and had given no answer. How Jesus could stay silent and give no answer when faced with such allegations is mind blowing. This is when the accused goes into a defensive mode and tries to prove his innocence. Here, the ones who should be passing a verdict on all that is happening are clearly biased against Jesus and have hardened their hearts against him. Hence, whatever Jesus says in defense and clarify his statements will fall on deaf ears of the jury. Hence, he chooses to remain silent and hands over the judgment of the ill treatment towards him who sent him, that is, towards God the Father. There are times in our life when people will bring false accusation in our lives as we do God's work faithfully. Our allegiance to God will make us enemies of those who are around us. They will do a character assassination on us. Our public reputation will be tarnished. How would we respond to people who have dedicated to destroy our lives? We normally resort to airing our grievances to others through a public forum, either through a Facebook post or through any other means. We spend a lot of time clarifying to others. We do all this because we feel a deep hurt in the assault caused to us by others, and it is natural to feel that way. But how do we become like Christ in such a situation? When Christ was in a situation like this, he chose to be silent. In that silence, he chooses to hand over the situation to God who is sovereign. That is all what we have to do. Be silent. God knows what we are going through. God knows our true situation and the reality of our lives. Rest on that. Allow God to bring out the truth and restore us. And when He does it, it is going to be foolproof. When we have God who knows the truth about us, there is no greater thing than to hand over all the burden to Him. Let Him do and make everything right. The high priest spoke after seeing Jesus being silent on this matter. Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? This question is not of sincerity. Caiaphas knows that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead and gave suggestions that Jesus must be killed. We can read about this in John's Gospel 11, verse 49 and 50. Jesus, in his answer, affirms the fact that he is the Messiah, and he deflected the responsibility back to the high priest. In his answer, Jesus combines Psalm 110 verse 1 and Daniel 7 verse 13 and 14. What is the significance of this answer? Number 1. To sit at the right hand of the Mighty One is to share the status of God, and it also suggests his equality with Yahweh. To come in the clouds of heaven is to be given glory, honor, power that belongs only to God. Also, the coming refers to the everlasting dominion and kingdom which will never be destroyed. In short, Jesus, in claiming to be the Messiah, the Son of God, affirms to the high priest that he is the Davidic king who is the Son. Also, he says that he shares the eternity and status and dominion and position with God. The high priest views these statements as blasphemy and tears his clothes. Now, what is odd about this action? Leviticus 21, verse 10 clearly states that the high priest is not supposed to tear his clothes. The high priest Caiaphas himself is violating the law as he accuses Jesus of committing blasphemy. We need to understand that this position of the high priest had become more of an authority position than a spiritual role. For someone who uses a spiritual role to do dirty politics and manipulate others for selfish purposes, how would we expect him to behave in a manner worthy of that spiritual role? How can we expect Caiaphas to obey the laws of the Old Testament when he doesn't look at the high priesthood with the dignity that God gives to it? If you find spiritual roles being occupied by people who do not see or view God's sanctity in it, what will you find? Total violation of God's standards, a worldly lifestyle, gross disobedience. This is what happens when something good is abused. Also, such people are hypocrites just as Caiaphas was. Caiaphas didn't see that he himself was violating God's law at the time that he is finding a non existent fault with Jesus. Why would he do it? He is afraid of his position being lost, as Jesus was getting immense popularity. We have someone who occupies a spiritual role. That person does not see the sanctity of that spiritual role and treats it as a position for worldly greatness. Disobedience and hypocrisy are characteristics of an unconverted person manning a spiritual role. He would be blind to his own sins, defiant in surrendering to God. Such a person will do anything to protect his position that he doesn't deserve. Coming back to Caiaphas, Jesus is condemned as worthy of death by the Sanhedrin. As we observe, we realize that all the Sanhedrin members are at fault. For one, seeking false testimony in spite of the law condemning it. Number two, not punishing the false witnesses as God demands. Number three, the high priest violating God's laws by tearing away his clothes. The only person who loves God and obeys Him at every turn in that room is Jesus. Yet, the most obedient person is condemned to death by all who violate God's laws. They subject Jesus to shameful physical torture tactics like spitting on him, beating him, etc. Why did he have to go through all of this? Reason. The reproaches of those who reproached God fell upon Jesus. God the Father chooses to make his Son the sin offering and the recipient of God's wrath. That sacrifice is done by the spotless Lamb of God, so that sinners will be free from punishment. A sinner regenerated by God through faith in Jesus Christ will see the depravity manifested in the religious people in this passage. They will look at it and themselves with disgust as they are given a new heart and a new birth. God makes all things new in a sinner. And after this, we find the third trial, which happens early in the morning, as we read in Mark's Gospel 15, verse 1, and Luke's Gospel 22, verse 66 to 71. Whatever has happened in the second trial has happened here as well. In this trial, the whole Sanhedrin was present and sentenced Jesus to death. The temple guards have already spit on him and have humiliated him. On a final note, I would just want to remind the couple of lessons that we had come across in this passage. Number one, hand over every false accusation brought on us with dependence entirely on God. And number two, understand that when a person who is unworthy takes a spiritual role, it results in hypocrisy, disobedience, selfish motives, etc. One needs to be born again to see the wretchedness, and that is done only by God. I hope this has been a blessing to all of you. Please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so and click the bell icon for more videos. Thank you, and may God bless all of you.